Hi there. If you've been enjoying the content that the American Soccer Crash Course podcast has been putting out, please go ahead and like and subscribe on YouTube, or go ahead and rate us on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify Music. We greatly appreciate the support, and our producer has been asking for a bit of a raise, so we'll take all the help we can get. Thanks.
All right, welcome back to the American Soccer Crash Course. As you can see, we've dropped from 50-something days down to 34 days to the World Cup. A little hiatus for the boys here, but we're really happy to be back. And today's a big one. We're going to be giving you the Christian Pulisic episode, which, to our knowledge, that's really the only household name in American soccer. Our friend Joe here, I think even he knows who Christian Pulisic is. So really excited to break this one down for you and really tell the people at home why Pulisic's a USMNT legend. That means U.S. Men's National Team, by the way. That acronym will get thrown around. So just to jump right into it, first we want to introduce our casual fan of the day, Joe Bertsche. Joe, you want to give us a rundown of your kind of casual fan experience?
Yeah, so before I was a fan, I was a player, first off, and I would like to say that my career was from early preschool throughout the fourth grade. My career came to an abrupt end, not because of the result of any injury or anything like that, but I accidentally missed one of my games due to a Six Flags trip. And it was at that moment that I decided my priorities were not there anymore, and I needed to look elsewhere for my athletic ambitions. Along with that...
Did you just quit mid-season?
I think that might have been the last game of the year or something.
Regular Aroldis Chapman, if
yes,
you will.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. I'm a little sussed out. You might just walk from the podcast midway through at this point.
And because it's the Christian Pulisic episode, I was actually thinking about this the other day, and I was going through this topic in my head was how many men's national players of all time could I name?
Yeah.
And he was one of four.
One of four. All right.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
yeah.
Well,
so
that's pretty good. I know we've talked about hitting the streets. We're gonna do it.
We're getting there. Yeah,
but,
it's in the works.
But our challenge would be, can anybody name three? So four is a pretty solid number, I would say.
Yeah.
Just to walk through our agenda for this big Christian Pulisic episode, we're going to check in with what's been going on with American soccer players. Lodge and I made our prospective lineups in the first episode of the show with the goal of really tracking how these players would be doing. And so we're going to see if there might be any updates.
There will be.
Yes, there you go. We're going to talk about today's man, which of course is Christian Pulisic. We're going to do a little explain in music terms segment but before going to rapid fire. Normally do rapid fire vocab. This is going to be rapid fire, like Christian Pulisic greatest hits, his biggest career moments, which have been documented in his new book, which people are saying he shouldn't write a book, but
A little early.
To do a quick check-in, the boys have been getting healthy since our last episode. We were talking about that poor international window and how we had several starters out who potentially would have made a difference. Without making excuses, some of those guys would have made a difference. And all those guys are getting healthy. Tim Weah is back. Yunus Musa is back. Jedi Robinson is back. Jedi, we did episode 2 on Jedi, so check that one out. But those other guys, you will meet them in the near future. On the other hand, the MLS season, we've had some MLS players get eliminated from the playoffs. We're going to do an episode soon on what the implications for this World Cup, its timing, and especially some of the MLS players. That's coming up, but for now, just know that a few MLS players got eliminated. As for our Star Watch, our best players, Pulisic and McKennie, Christian Pulisic, the man right here, he came back and started a game for Chelsea under their new coach and had a really good game and scored. However, still not gotten too much playing time. We think he's going to play tomorrow in the Premier League. So watch out for that.
Quick question.
Yeah.
How many members of the men's national team are MLS players versus players in other foreign leagues?
Yes. Elijah, you want to take this?
It's about 10 out of 26, I would say, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so there's been a big chunk of them.
And then now another question.
Yeah.
Other international teams, do they have any MLS players on any other national teams that you can think of?
For sure. I mean, so fun fact about the MLS, most of the players actually are not American. Like the vast majority are not American. So, I mean, it's kind of, I would say through certainly not very many European countries would have any MLSers, but throughout the rest of North, South America, I would say maybe you'll get like one guy here, one guy there, especially like smaller South American countries, like maybe like Paraguay or something like that.
Ecuador, Colombia, definitely, yeah.
Yeah. Plus I got one good game. Weston McKennie is struggling. You're going to meet him. And there's a big position battle at striker, which is the person who puts the goals in. And several of our strikers have begun to really ramp up their production. So to name them, Pifak, Pepe, and Sargent are all putting goals in right now. So Lodge, to kick it over to you. Apologize for the viewers if none of that made much sense, but important to get a little check-in. Lodge, what does your lineup look like right now?
So my lineup's pretty much staying the exact same from what it was at the beginning, and as far as the back and the midfield. So still in goal, probably Matt Turner. I don't think that changes at all. Left back, Jai Robinson. We did the episode on him. Walker Zimmerman and Chris Richards if he's healthy. If not, that's tough. I'm going to leave that one. I'm going to say anybody but Aaron Long. If you don't know why, check out our last episode. First episode, yeah. Lastly, in the back, Serginho Dest, getting some playing time at AC Milan in the Italian league, which is good. Not doing that great, but there's more room for improvement. Midfield, still going to go with McKennie, Musa, and Tyler Adams, guys that we'll all touch on later. And then, as Kristen mentioned, coming back from injury, Timothy Weah, that we're excited about. The main man for today's episode, Christian Pulisic. And then up top, I'm going to make a change. Originally, I did have Pifak. I think right now, based on form alone and the amount of looks that he's getting and the confidence and what that takes and what that means for a striker, I'm going to go Josh Sargent. He's a redhead. You definitely know him when we bring him up, and he's definitely one to look out for coming into this World Cup. Joe, what is form?
What is form?
Yeah.
The composure a player has on the pitch.
So form, little soccer vocab, is basically just like how a player's trending.
Trending, okay.
Yeah, so like the very short-term analysis of how they've been doing. So Lodge, I'm keeping much of what I'm doing. I believe in the first episode I had Brendan Aronson playing right wing. I'm going to switch that to Tim Weah. During the last few games the U.S. had, a lot of the offense was very congested. It was all coming through the middle of the field. Tim Weah is like a fast player. He's got lots of tricks up his sleeve. He can really take the game to the outside, spread the offense out a little bit, make things a little bit more dynamic. Another question you raised, Chris Richards. Ideally, we'd love to have him, but he's at Joe. I believe you actually said your favorite club is Crystal Palace. I don't get the sense that you watched their game today.
No, but I follow their Twitter account.
Okay, there you go. And so Chris Richards is on Crystal Palace, but he's still hurt. So 34 days. It's time's ticking.
Less than 5 weeks.
Yeah, I'm Chris Richards out. Not that it's that serious, but I think I want Cameron Carter-Vickers in at the other starting center back place. That's about as in the weeds as we're going to get here. I'm going to tap in the fourth member of our crew here, Max Heath, and we are going to break down our main man today, Christian Pulisic. So,
absolutely.
So just a reminder for those of you who are joining us, really what we're covering on the podcast is talking about all of the different starters that are going to be on this U.S. men's national team. The most important player that we'll definitely talk about, and one many of you will know, is Christian Pulisic. To start off this episode, we'd like to go over a clip from Pawn Stars, the lovely American show, and really a clip that goes over how he's perceived in the United States.
Hey, how's it going? So what do we got here?
I have a signed Christian Pulisic jersey. Plays for Chelsea FC team in the Premier League.
This guy's like the phenom guy, right? He's like the LeBron James of soccer.
Definitely.
I gotta give him credit where it's due. I mean, soccer wouldn't be my choice. A lot of running.
Definitely. I'm at the pawn shop today to try and sell my signed Christian Pulisic jersey. I'm a huge soccer fan, and even more so a Christian Pulisic fan. But I'm looking to sell it to try and upgrade my guitar. I'm hoping to get $1,500 today. Christian Pulisic is only going to go up in value.
This is pretty cool. Christian Pulisic is an American soccer player. He plays for Chelsea in England. And do you know what positions it is?
Yeah, he plays center midfield and sometimes center forward.
His nickname is Captain America because he was the youngest player to ever be a captain of an American team. Both his parents played college soccer, and then his mom, through like a teacher's exchange program, brought him with her over to England, and he started playing soccer over there.
He ended up being one of the top players in the Premier League, which, I mean, for an American, that's pretty far and few between. He is probably one of the most watched on the Chelsea team.
Okay, so what are you looking to get out of it?
About 1,500.
Okay, I'd like to have somebody come take a look at the signature. Do you mind?
That's okay with me, yeah.
All right, I'll be back with you, all right?
Thank you. I'm hoping that the expert will get close to my asking price. I think that once he sees the framing and the signature, he's going to agree with my price.
So yeah, this is it, Steve.
Oh, cool.
Hey, how you doing?
Oh, nice. Do you know much about this? You're a big soccer fan, aren't you?
Clearly.
Christian Pulisic's one of the finest soccer players or football players in the world. And he plays in England. He plays for Chelsea, and the kid's 22 years old. So, you imagine the talent this guy has. You know, we think of guys like Messi or Ronaldo, and this kid's already being compared to all that.
So coming back from that Pawn Stars clip, one thing before we get too far into this is I want to point out that there were a lot of wrong things that they talked about there. Number one, his position. Number two, his story, how he got into England and playing. And those are definitely things that we're going to cover, but I want to point out just the fact that he's now the number one soccer player in the United States, and still people have no idea what's going on with him. Just to talk about, how young this sport is and how much we think it can grow.
It's pretty remarkable. He's on the same trajectory as a young Ronaldo and young Messi, like it was pointed out in the video.
Yeah, I wouldn't quite say that, but yeah. Well, without further ado, Max, you want to talk a little bit about Christian?
Yeah. So I guess just a little introduction on Christian Pulisic. Contrary to what our friend in the Pawn Stars video said, he actually plays as a winger. He plays left wing, and he is really fast. Is really his defining characteristic. He's fast. He's a good dribbler. He likes to take people on one-on-one, which sort of makes his play style a bit feast or famine, because there's certain games when he's taking people on and able to get by them and look great. There's other games where he tries to do that, loses the ball, and looks not so great. So his playing style, I would say, just lends itself to some volatility, and I think that's one of the themes I think with Christian Pulisic. But when he's on, it is a really fun player to watch, as we'll talk about. But when he's off, not as much. But yeah, and as we've talked about, his nickname's Captain America, obviously being the captain of the team, as well as the LeBron James of soccer, which is a funny one. He also has, similar to LeBron James, does have a great sleeve of tattoos, which is quite a nice sleeve, I will say.
Yeah,
so
it was pretty cool. To talk a little bit more about Christian's story, his mom may have been a teacher, but definitely didn't go to England, and that's how he got into European soccer. What happened was he was actually playing in a Youth World Cup for the United States, born and raised in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and what kind of transpired is Dortmund, Christian's favorite team. I'm a Bayern fan, another team in Germany, but Dortmund has world-renowned academy, and they actually scouted him, brought him over. And one thing to note is that he was brought over at the young age of 16. Usually, for a United States player or many national players, you do have to wait to go to Europe until you're 18. That's just a rule as far as passports and everything like that. But the reason that Christian was actually able to circumvent that is because his dad had a Croatian passport. That is something that we definitely credit to Christian's ability to thrive at such a young age. Playing in that Dortmund team, getting first team minutes very quickly, and really playing in an area that allowed him to grow and progress from such a young age is why we were talking about him for even before the last World Cup, why he was the number one man, why we're still calling him the LeBron James of soccer, things like that.
So real quick, is there any realistic path that Christian Pulisic could have taken through a college route? Say he went to the best men's college soccer program in the nation. Is there any way that he gets to where he's at through the university program, American University?
So my personal opinion, no. The reason that I say that is because when you're in an academy from such a young age, your whole life is revolving around soccer. It's no longer how much work you can do in school to kind of propel yourself, although school is a little bit on the back burner. A lot of these people get high school equivalent degrees, things like that. It is soccer, 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 and then a little bit more soccer.
Yeah, I will say though, like I think that's becoming more plausible now more than ever. I think to have the success Christian's had at the young age, that's not possible. I think if you play college soccer, it's just a completely different ball game. But someone like for example, Zach Steffen, which is one of the goalkeepers for the United States, he played at Maryland, I believe, was it? And he's kind of carved out a pretty successful European career, albeit at a goalkeeper position, which is different. But I think it's becoming a path that's more plausible. Even like Jack Harrison Lodge, like he's played at Wake Forest and now
Another
plays
good
on
point,
Leeds.
yeah.
So I think it's becoming more possible. But to be able to come from college and automatically be starting in the Premier League, that's really not realistic. But
So continuing on with the story of Christian Pulisic, when he moved to Germany, I think he was 16, as I mentioned earlier. He moved with his father from a very kind of isolated space. And so a lot of it was still focused around that training. He had conversations in interviews where he was talking about the fact that he was really isolated from the rest of the players. Although some of them spoke English, it was difficult because they had all bonded around German soccer for such a long time. They had bonded around the European experience. When his father left, he remembered going into classes where they were just speaking to the class in straight German. He had no idea what was going on, and it was pretty much a sink or swim situation. There were times where he mentioned crying coming home from class because he just didn't know what went on that day. To be in that environment and not to have a family is definitely something that kind of stuck with him. And where he found solace was in playing. I mean, he really just poured his life, heart, and soul into it. Moving up through the ranks very, very quickly and getting into those first team very early. He was actually, bar German players, he was the youngest player to ever score in the Bundesliga, the German league, which is a very, very important accomplishment and why he got so many of those comparisons to Messi, Ronaldo, players like that from such a young age. Kind of continuing on, I think around that time, it was around that time, once he had that goal and moved into the first team, he started to get more and more minutes. This was a time when players such as, I think Jadon Sancho came in, another England young talent similar to Christian. He came into the Borussia Dortmund team and ended up usurping him. But before that had happened, he was actually in the line for the youngest or the best young player of the year, which is called, the Copa. I believe the Copa Trophy. He came in sixth, I want to say. Another name that we'll mention, or you'll probably hear moving up into the World Cup, is Kylian Mbappe, French's number one striker. He's the one who ended up winning that. But to be in the running for anything like that for a young American is astounding to hear.
yeah, and then I guess on sort of the U.S. perspective, I mean, he breaks into the Dortmund team really young. Obviously scores youngest goal scorer in the Bundesliga history, and pretty much instantly becomes the star of the show from about the age of 17. I mean, they instantly kind of just put this kid, on all the tickets and all the pregame manuals, and is really from a really young age the star of the show, which I think is a little different than how it maybe work if he was European. But he comes in right away and actually performs really well for the U.S. as well. Scores a couple of goals and pretty. I mean, what age was he given the captaincy? I mean, like he got to be pretty young.
I think it was like 18. I think it was like really, really young because it was before the last World Cup. Yeah. Going into the World Cup qualifiers, the ones that we will not talk about on this podcast, we refuse to do so. But some of those really terrible games, I remember him having the armband and putting that kind of pressure on a young kid. Although he tried his hardest to live up to the limelight, that just shows the talent that he had from such a young age, I would say.
Yeah, no, and he came in super young, and it's weird now, at only 23 years old, the same age as basically we are. He's sort of like an elder statesman of this team now, and really one of the only remaining players that were on that tragic 2018 World Cup qualifier. So, it's interesting. It is crazy thinking about how he basically is one of the elder statesmen at 23. But yeah.
And as far as his game goes, did people figure it out? Was he a one-trick pony? What was it that slowed down his progression from sort of this phenom status to now, the elder statesman that people,
Yeah, no, great question. I think number one is injuries. A player such as him, where he's all attack, all go at all times, he definitely needs to be able to run quickly, have the endurance, have the stamina, and the problem with him is his hamstrings. So although you want to go and you want to be able to go, once you lose a little bit of that speed or a little bit of that kick, it can take a while to get that confidence back. So that was where he started to struggle, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But one thing that he's definitely doing is evolving his game a little bit, so it's not just focused on speed and beating a man, but also developing in other areas.
Yeah, I mean, I will say on the U.S. side, I mean, he still is like the guy. I think despite his struggles, he's still the best player that we got. I think more so his struggles are talked about in the context of his club play with Chelsea, and then that's just really, like Lodge said, the injuries are a big factor, but it's also so competitive. Like if he's not scoring goals, they have another player they paid $50 million for it to come in right behind him. So it's easy to get kind of churned out pretty quickly. So.
And we'll be talking a little bit more about that Chelsea portion, but right now we're going to take a quick ad break.
All right, guys, welcome back. Christian tapping back in here for Max. It's going to be a little bit of a tag team here, but wanted to tell you about the Paul Farrington show. So, Joe, you're familiar with Paul.
I am, yeah.
You familiar with his work?
A little bit, yeah.
Why don't you read that? It's not on a piece of paper. Why don't you just tell us about the Paul Farrington show?
Well, the Paul Farrington Show is a great perspective on all things NFL, all things fantasy, and is a one-stop shop for all your NFL and football information that you the casual fan might want, or the intense NFL fan might want.
Well said, well said. So yeah, check out Paul's show. We're going to be bouncing back and forth, promoting one another, but awesome show for NFL. Definitely sprinkles in some college and some betting as well. So thanks for doing that on the spot, Joe.
Oh, of course.
Got to look alive around here.
Yeah.
So this is an analogy that's been in the back of my brain long before any podcast was there.
Sure. Seem to be getting an analogy once an episode or now, Christian.
Yeah. Explain in blank terms. So normally it's explain in NBA or NFL, but today's explain in music terms. So this was an era of mine, high school, a little angsty. Loved that just like 2000s rock kind of thing. So, Bertsche, what is the one song from college that just got beaten to your head so many times that you couldn't bear to listen to it? Normally like a close down at the bar kind of song.
Mr. Brightside or
right, you had it nailed
Weezer.
Nailed Weezer. Stop
Okay.
right there, Mr. Brightside. So I want to talk about Mr. Brightside today. I want you to think of Mr. Brightside. Do you want to sing it, Lodge? I was actually going to put it up, but it might get copyrighted.
I'm gonna pass on that.
All right,
appreciate
fair
it.
enough. I want you to think of Mr. Brightside as the moment, as the climax of, if you will, of American soccer. I don't know what that looks like exactly. I don't know if that's winning a World Cup. That would be ambitious. I don't know if that's semis. I don't know if it's beating Brazil. I don't know what it is. But it's the moment that we all look at one another and go, this is a proper soccer country and like a proper player on the international stage. So I want you to think of Mr. Brightside as that. Who's Mr. Brightside by, Lodge? You're kind of thinking about it for a while.
Yeah.
You serious right now?
No, I mean I'm not thinking about it. It's Christian Pulisic. There's no
No.
The Killers.
Yes, the
Killers.
Just
So you're
by
asking me who's the Killers
Yeah,
in this situation? Okay.
yeah, sorry.
I jumped the gun. I definitely jumped the gun there. Yeah.
All right, so I want you to think about the Killers as the group that is going to win the U.S. Maybe it's that World Cup, whatever that moment is, whatever that looks like. The talented group that vaults us on the world stage, okay? Now, the Killers are a product of many bands like them. Think like Arctic Monkeys, like Franz Ferdinand, any of those bands, if you've heard those songs. Yeah, so they're one of several. So in a sense, yeah, they obviously deserve all the credit for Mr. Brightside and, closing down the bar like many nights in college, but they are one of many that could have got that kind of pinnacle, that song, right? All right, now I want to talk about one more band, and that is the Strokes. That is my favorite band. So the Strokes in 2001 came out with an album, Is This It?
Is this it? Yeah.
You like that one?
Big fan.
Bertsche?
I don't know.
You're
No, I
not
don't know.
sure. Okay, anyways. But Is This It, like, was a huge thing, especially, like, it floated over to the UK and and back again to the U.S. But essentially, it was this sound, this kind of like rock sound that had some like 70s and 80s mixed in, but also
Some Tom Petty and some American Girl.
a little bit. Yeah. So funny you say that. One of the Strokes songs was like,
Oh no, I'm aware.
okay, yeah. So they were, said they copied Tom Petty, but so that was they kind of struck gold in the sense of not only like the songs they made on this album, but also like the sound. Like people loved the sound and kind of this leap they made. They were like the first mover in this category. Okay, and so I want you to think about Christian Pulisic as the Strokes. Okay, now the Strokes. Maybe some of you are hearing about them for the first time, and you know who the Killers are, or you know who the Arctic Monkeys are. But the Strokes and Christian Pulisic are similar in that they were the first mover. Okay, they did what no one else had done before, and they popularized a thing and a trend that would go on to really dominate their given space. And so, when the Killers were asked about their song "Mr. Brightside" and how it compared to other bands, they said, "Mr. Brightside and all our songs, we are not in the same category as the Strokes. The Strokes are a million times better than us." On the Arctic Monkeys, like 2016 album or whatever it was, the first line of the album was, "I just wanted to be one of the Strokes." In other words, all those bands that we talked about that really could have made that Mr. Brightside song, all those quality bands, Arctic Monkeys, Killers, Franz Ferdinand, they were all inspired by the same band, the Strokes. Christian Pulisic is the Strokes of the U.S. men's national team, and here's why. Because at 15 years old, he was just a 15-year-old kid like any of us were, and he had talent, and he was scouted and whatnot. But Lodge, here's something that I've thought about. You played youth soccer, maybe not to that level.
Certainly not.
But so yeah, to clarify. But he was scouted at a camp, right? Like a World Cup camp. Am I really supposed to believe that he was the first American talent to be scouted at a camp at 15 years old?
Highly doubt it. Yeah.
Right. So it wasn't that it's not that he's our best soccer player ever because, he essentially was the most talented we've ever had, but rather he got a call at 15 years old. And at 15 years old, he decided to move his whole life over to Germany where he didn't speak the language. And to be clear, it's not like he got handed a contract and like the keys to the kingdom, so to speak. It was very much like okay, you can be in our academy, but like, who knows what's going to happen? Like he could have essentially thrown away his whole high school, maybe, at that point, college, right? Like, what do you even do to be this kind of first mover in this space? And so as I say this, the United States men's national team's Mr. Brightside moment, whatever that is, there will be no one more to do with it than Christian Pulisic because he has inspired like a massive sweeping generation of Americans to make that jump overseas, take that risk, and essentially normalize like moving your life over to Europe when it doesn't feel like it makes sense. Like, there's a retort to this that says, hey, well, like Brazilian kids have been doing this for however long, Argentinian kids have been doing this. Like, what makes Americans special in this context? And what I would say is, like, if people around you are doing it, if it's like the thing, then you're going to be into it, you're going to believe in it, and like you're going to accept it with open arms. But when you feel like you're the first mover, you're one of the only ones to do it. It's a lot more daunting, I'd say. Joe?
Yeah, and one of the things I'm thinking about is you've talked about what's the pivotal moment on the field. Is it we get out of the group stage? Is it we beat Brazil? Is it we do X, Y, Z? Then there's the pivotal moment in terms of youth soccer and how the United States views youth soccer. And then I'm thinking about also culturally, what is the pivotal moment culturally? Is the pivotal moment when I can name 10 soccer players and we have that kind of buy-in from the average American sports fan? Is it that I will actually pay money for extra soccer TV channels? Is it that I'm buying merchandise? What's the cultural pivotal moment that we need to see?
Personally, I think that's yet to be seen. I mean, similar to how when the Strokes were making music, they didn't know that the Killers were going to come out. They didn't know that Franz Ferdinand was going to come out. All those great things came out of it, but it's almost like a wait and see.
I also think, like you see, we're getting a World Cup in 4 years. As Lodge and I have talked about on this podcast, like it's about eyeballs. So if these players can, like in this World Cup coming up, if they can capture hearts and minds, then the cultural aspect is a byproduct, in my opinion. And even like there's kind of an idea out there that like Americans need to embrace the MLS in order for America to be a good soccer country. That's a whole nother conversation, but I don't believe the answer is yes. Not that that's not anti-MLS, despite the fact that we've been accidentally anti-MLS. But I don't believe that to be true. I just think that, as Law just said many times, America likes winners. So if this team can go out there and prove that, which is very much a byproduct of the kind of awesome things Christian Pulisic has done, then I think that cultural kind of change will happen. And so, in my opinion, despite the fact that, to finish the story on the Strokes, so the Strokes burst on the scene, made this incredible album, and from there, like went pretty slightly downhill. Obviously, they had fans, which is like art is a way more subjective thing, but there's a general consensus that they went downhill from there and inspired a wave of people who would really bring the quality out in this music. And in the same way, Christian Pulisic, his career has already been rocky. It's been filled with really cool moments, but his day-to-day has always been like a source of drama or whatnot for the U.S. men's national team. So in that way, it's unclear whether or not his legendary status is going to like continue in the next 10 years that he plays. But in my opinion, he will always be a legend for that. Just to give you some numbers, when he went over in 2018, when he was really bursting on the scene, there was 9 players in the top 5 leagues in the Champions League in Europe. Several of those players, probably like 3 or 4 of them, were dual national players who were like half German, half American, who our coach at the time had recruited. And today, just 4 years later, there's 22. Way more of those are players who lived in the U.S., decided to make that jump because they wanted to be like Christian Pulisic. And did so. And so that number's up from 9 to 22. But then even if you expanded that into some of the other European leagues, like say the soccer league that's in the Netherlands, which isn't as good as like the top ones, but is also more competitive than like the MLS, with no disrespect, that number is like way larger. That number's like grows from like 22 to 50. And so that's kind of like the level of impact his emergence at Dortmund takes. And that's why he is the Strokes of the U.S. men's national team.
Pulisic is the Strokes. I like it.
Yeah. All right. Max is tapping back in. End of analogy. Hope that hit home.
Christian's hopping off the soapbox for the night. Thank you, Christian. All right, so tapping back in, Max. So back to talk about the Strokes. So let's talk a little bit about Christian Pulisic's career. So number one, definitely a very shy character. I mean, coming in at a very young age into the national team, being in that spotlight, where, you know, in Germany, he was a very shy guy. He was a regular kid growing up. He was very shy. Being thrust into the spotlight has definitely proven for some super high highs and super low lows. But let's start rapid firing them back and forth and tell the pod a little bit about them.
Yeah, so we're going to do some rapid fire big moments here. The first one to really kind of, you know, put Christian Pulisic on, so to speak, was the 2017 German Cup. He got subbed on for Marco Reus, who's a pretty famous German player, and came on and drew the game-winning penalty, which was really kind of his introduction to the world stage, I would say.
Following that up, something I mentioned a little bit earlier, but just to continue and reiterate, in 2018, young English star Jadon Sancho came into Germany, into the Dortmund team, and actually usurped Christian from playing while Dortmund was on the title challenge.
Yeah. Even with that, Christian Pulisic in 2019 was actually signed by Chelsea for $58 million, which at the time was that's a pretty huge fee for any player, Premier League, but for an American player, that was by far the largest transfer ever, and it was pretty. I can't even imagine. What do you think like the next largest one was at that time? It could have been not much more than like 20.
Yeah,
no?
I would say maybe. John Brooks.
John Brooks was, yeah. So John
from our
the
producer.
Highest,
thank you, producer.
Thank you. The highest transfer before this was 25. Christian Pulisic gets a $60 million transfer fee, which was a huge deal to Chelsea. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. Following that up, joining Chelsea in the summer of 2019, had a rather slow start going into the season, but definitely made it count in October of 2019 away at Burnley, another Premier team, known definitely to hold it in, pack it in, but he scored his first goal, and then he scored 2 more for Chelsea, so coming in with his first career hat trick, which was pretty exciting to see.
Yeah, and then the next rapid fire moment is probably my one near and dear to my heart. Was lockdown Christian Pulisic during the COVID lockdown. Probably at the peak of my soccer watching time, I was watching like almost all of these games, and Christian Pulisic went off in 11 of those games over lockdown. He had 7 goals and 4 assists. Looked like an absolute beast. Looked like the best player on the field when he played. I remember watching it, being pumped up for America, literally singing the national anthem, watching. No, I'm just kidding. But he looked incredible on the Premier League stage, and I was like, wow, this guy is for real. To sort of bring in an NBA analogy, as we like to do on this podcast, it's sort of like bubble Jamal Murray in a way. Like this vintage of Christian Pulisic was like insane. It's almost like a bottle of wine if you think of players like vintages. Like at this vintage of Christian Pulisic was something special. It was great, and I really wish that we could get that vintage.
And one thing definitely to note is similar to bubble Jamal Murray, bubble Christian Pulisic also did not play in front of fans. Not saying that definitely was one of the catalysts of it, but he certainly performed when given the opportunity during that.
Yeah, so you guys talked a little bit about transfers or buying players. Can you guys talk a little bit more about how that differs from the Big Four sports league contracts and exactly how that works a little bit?
So actually, great question. Segues into next week's episode. But just to give you a little bit of background, the biggest thing is that players can get transferred halfway through the season in only 1 month periods, and then in the off season. So you have a month between, I think, December and January that you can go ahead and pick somebody up mid-season, or you can also do loan contracts. But that's something that we're going to talk about next, so stay tuned.
Should I not get any more of the differences?
Let's
Okay.
leave something to be desired.
All right. We'll save the good stuff for next one. Mm-hmm. But
yeah, flash forwarding to Champions League 2021. We're going to talk a little bit about Chelsea's title run, winning the Champions League, and the role Christian Pulisic played in that. So in the semifinal, first leg, Christian went against Real Madrid and actually scored the fantastic solo goal, dribbling all the way past quite a few different defenders. Great knee slide moment, if I remember correctly. And then in the second leg, follows it up with a great assist off the bench. Not sure why he didn't start after scoring in the first leg, but not going to argue with that. Sending Chelsea into the Champions League final. Additionally, he did appear off the bench in the 1-0 victory over Manchester City, becoming the first American to ever win the Champions League. Pretty exciting. Additionally, something I want to call out, explaining in NBA terms, I don't know if any of you have seen the Chicago Bulls or the Michael Jordan 6-part series, but similar to how Jordan had Tony Kukoc on the team, and he was supposed to be the next up-and-coming guy, and Kukoc definitely came into that team and performed when he had to, and really was one of the first overseas players to play. Christian was one of the very first United States players to play, making that impact, definitely providing a little bit of a kick and a catalyst to the Champions League winning team of Chelsea.
Yeah, and then a week later, after that, Christian goes into the Nations League with the U.S. And draws the penalty deep in extra time, and then scores it upper 90 to beat Mexico, and then like any good soccer celebration, takes his shirt off and starts waving it rapidly. That was quite a moment for Christian Pulisic. Probably maybe his best moment in a U.S. jersey. But, that was pretty awesome.
Let's hold on there, because the number one that I'm going to talk about, my personal favorite, having been at the game, was the November 21 man in the mirror moment. For those of you that remember, Christian was coming off a little bit of an injury, and so wasn't able to start that game, but got subbed on somewhere around the 50th, 60th minute, and was almost an immediate impact, breaking the deadlock against Mexico in a World Cup qualifier. Massive game, hosted in Cincinnati, and ended up doing the exact same thing as Max is saying, throwing his shirt around, revealing his undershirt man in the mirror, which is a testament to Guillermo Ochoa, Mexico's goalkeeper, saying, the United States when they look in the mirror, they see Mexico as we were looking to emulate them in everything that we were doing. As up until that time, there was quite a bit of back and forth on whether we were better or Mexico was better. Historically, it had been Mexico, and they definitely shown that, but that was a bit of a turning point in the national kind of areas.
The show loves analogies. For the average soccer fan, how would you describe the U.S.-Mexico rivalry, assuming the global stage is the league?
I mean, in a global context, like relatively speaking, the U.S. and Mexico are relatively insignificant, I think, international soccer-wise. I mean, it is a pretty good rivalry. I would describe it.
Harvard Yale in the sense of college football.
Yes, that's actually that's a great call.
That's a pretty good one.
Harvard Yale would be a good. It's a fierce rivalry between the two. The teams definitely have some
Small crowds.
Yes, but small crowds.
Well, not Mexico.
Mexico really does care probably a lot more as a country as well. I think that's a good analogy, though.
Yes, I would say similar to maybe in conference championships, you're going to get a lot more players or a lot more people come to the games. You're going to get a lot more hate on both sides. In that game, there was definitely a lot of hate, but we came out on top, and it was great to see. From what I remember, I was in fact a little intoxicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Next big moment is March 2022. Christian Pulisic's hat trick against Panama, which effectively sent us to the World Cup, which was pretty big to see from Christian.
Yeah. And one thing that our producer wanted to mention was definitely that this was a bit of a cathartic experience making this list, looking back on the career of such a young talent, but someone so important in the United States men's national team history and definitely the team building up into the World Cup. Had quite a few high and lows, and I think we talked about the first high that we were talking about is in 2017, so pretty much all since that last World Cup. They've all been spanned in that very small amount of time. He's done a lot of growing up, and we're excited to see the more mature product that is Christian Pulisic at this age.
Yeah, and I will say, Christian Pulisic, he really kind of feels like Perry Ellis in a way, in the sense that like he feels like he's been around forever, but he's only 23. I feel like this guy has been around since I've started caring really about U.S. soccer, but he's still so young, relatively speaking. And going through this list, I think has made me realize, because in my head I'm like, oh yeah, his career's still ramping up. He's kind of still kind of breaking out, but he's already kind of done a lot, which is this was a good way to really highlight that, I think, with these rapid fire moments.
Just to remember correctly, Perry Ellis is the dude for Kansas.
Yeah.
Came in when he was like 17.
Yeah,
and
Perry Ellis,
balled.
I could have also said maybe Hunter Renfro. Like, he's just been around forever, but he's really still, quite fresh. But, yeah.
Gotcha. And lastly, a little bit of homework for all the people out there that are interested in learning a little bit more outside the podcast is the Players Tribune article about missing the World Cup, really talking Christian Pulisic through his experience with why he thinks we missed the World Cup and why so many players are moving to Europe and gaining experience there, and why he did it from his own perspective. So that's pretty much all we had for today. As always, thank you for listening, and have a good rest of your day. 34 days left. All right.